Hi everyone. Hello. So welcome to this series of support of Ace Your Econs. My name is Jeffrey. I'm the Chief Educator of Ace Your Econs, Singapore's most practice-driven JC Econs Tuition Center. So support of Ace Your Econs is a community event we have established this year to support our A-level community to help them succeed even beyond A-levels. In the series, we will be inviting experts to share tips on how to succeed in A-levels and even beyond A-levels. So to parents and students watching this, please help us to like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can receive the latest updates on upcoming interviews. Please also help to share this live event with your friends, family, colleagues so they can benefit from the collective wisdom of our experts. And don't forget to say hi and have fun for the next 60 minutes. So today we have Dr. Chan Khai Leok with us. Dr. Chan, can you say hi to everyone?
Hello, everyone. Hello.
All right. So Dr. Chan is the founder of theRightU, a certified education consultancy and UCAS application center, representing more than 300 educational institutes across Australia, New Zealand, UK, Ireland, US, Canada, and Switzerland. So through the use of innovative technology and the support of their passionate team of educational planners, theRightU provides quality and hassle-free consultation for students, allowing them to enjoy success placements at the right universities. So a really fun fact about Dr. Chan himself is he has studied in UK and Australia for 6 years, and this really allows him to provide personal insights on the overseas education scene. So Dr. Chan, welcome again. Thanks for being here with us. So Dr. Chan, I'm just curious, when I was reading through your profile, it was actually quite interesting. Okay, so how do you actually get started with theRightU? I understand that when your profile actually stated that you were formerly with A-Star, right, as a researcher.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey. Thanks for inviting me to this session. Very honored.
Thank you.
Happy to share some of the insights.
Thank you.
Good question. How did I get into this industry? Well, when I completed my PhD, and as with most, research graduates, what they will do is they'll enter the workforce as a researcher.
Right.
So I did the same. I was under a scholarship with DSTA. So my first
Right.
job with DSTA.
DSTA.
But I found that the work in A-Star was more relevant to my training. And so for the next 5 years or so, I was actually with A-Star. So started with research and then went up the ladder, I guess, if you could put it, to become a principal investigator, working with a group of researchers on pretty interesting stuff. We are looking at those flexible LEDs. So in the good old days, those were kind of at the forefront of research. But today, of course, we already see them in flip phones and things like that. It's come a long way, but also in the earlier years, when I was in A-Star, there was a huge emphasis within the organization to increase the awareness of research among the young studying community.
Right.
So A-Star actually put in a lot of effort in outreach, organizing science competitions, getting students to participate in attachment programs in A-Star, essentially giving them all sorts of opportunities, to expose themselves to research. I was heavily involved in those activities, and through that I got in contact with, quite a number of students,
Right.
the young, the early, secondary school students, all the way to diploma students, graduates, and even a couple of PhD students. And very often, the kind of questions that I get asked when they know that I've, spent quite a bit of time overseas is, questions like, oh, should I further my studies? If I do, should I further my studies abroad? And if so, then, what are the kind of countries that I should consider? Just pardon me, I think the screen just went off. So there are all these questions that came about that made me, think back to the days when I was deciding on my further studies. And I realized, yeah, perhaps, there's this huge community of students that actually need help. And I could, through my personal experience, support them in some way.
Right.
So that's how I gradually moved into education. But it was also at the time when there was a confluence of, the need for objective kind of advice in the industry and the digitization of information. Okay, the
Right.
reason I said that is, as you can imagine, I mean, Singapore we're talking about 6 um, universities, but across the globe, there's actually a lot more. We are talking about, close to 20,000 universities across the world.
Right.
So how do students actually start, their selection process, among the two? Clearly, they can't be flipping, 20,000 websites, just to look
Right.
at the files of every uni.
Right.
But digitization actually allows us to, aggregate all the data, pretty much like what the shopping marketplace does, online marketplace, your hotel, digital hotels, and so on.
Right.
So we figured that if we were to digitize, some of these information, put it out in a way that students, can easily compare and contrast and do searches, then it will be a great benefit, to the community at large. We would have done a service to our students. So that's how we started. That's how I started with a couple of people around me.
Right. So before we move on to the next segment, okay, to the viewers out there, okay, if you like what we are doing right now, if you'd like to support Dr. Chan for taking precious time off to join us in a Monday evening, okay, please give us a thumbs up, okay, so that we know that you are here with us for tonight. So, Dr. Chan, you actually mentioned that the digitization and the aggregation of information actually fast forward and propels the RightU direction in matching students. So back then, I'm just curious, when you were a student yourself, many years back, how do you make the informed? How have you made the informed decision to the Australia and UK schools that you enroll into?
Well,
When
that's
info wasn't that
yeah.
transparent.
I mean, that means turning back the clock, 20, 25 years back.
Can't
At
tell,
that
can't tell.
time, I mean, you can imagine the internet isn't that well established. We were still using the good old modem that goes tee 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 tee, and so you
Right.
could hardly put anything off the internet. I went to the British Council Library. I still remember. They
Wow.
had a physical library where they would store all the prospectuses of the different universities.
Wow.
And so but that was also the time when I hardly knew many universities in the UK. I probably knew about 5 or 6 of them, maybe the top ranked ones because
Right.
often discussed about in school and among peers.
Oxbridge,
But
you mean?
Bridge, Imperial, UCL,
Yeah.
LSE, and pretty much, that's about it.
Right.
So times have changed now. If you just put into Google, UK universities listing, you can already see all the 150, 160 UK universities in one,
Right.
right? Also at that time, everything was snail mail. So there was no digital application, there was no emails and stuff. We were writing our personal statement on physical paper. We were sending them across the ocean, and we were
Right.
hoping that at the receiving end they actually receive it. And the offers came by snail mail as well. So it took us many months to hear back from the universities.
Wow.
So times have changed. I think with digitization as well, the delivery of information needs to be changed. When we started the RightU, we couldn't actually find a portal that captures, universities and summarize, the key points that would
Right.
be a reference for students. There are some websites, but they're not catered to the Singapore or the regional audience. Um,
Right.
and they were certainly structured in a way that was meant to advertise rather than to objectively demonstrate the university information. So we moved in that direction quite strongly. Today our website has about 200-300 universities and almost 50,000 courses, all sorts, from foundation to degree, postgraduate studies, and so on. It's still not as comprehensive as we would like it to be. I mean, we think that it could be even more substantial in the coming years. But I think it's a good start, for many students, and I hope that this has been useful for most.
All right. So Dr. Chan actually mentioned about the RightU and the website. Okay, so for the viewers out there, okay, I've actually dropped the RightU's university in the link, okay, under the comment section, the link under the comment section. Okay, so make sure you check out the RightU, okay, and especially if you're considered to pursue your university abroad, okay, look out for the RightU and the course listing mentioned there. All right, so thanks, Dr. Chan. We'll be officially moving on to the highlights of this evening, okay, which are the 4 tips. Usually we have 3, but when I was looking at yours, you had 4 for me. So I was thinking how to fit 4 instead of 3. Okay, let's see how the evening goes, okay, and see how much you can cover. All right, so for the viewers out there, thank you for tuning in. So if you like what we are doing right now, okay, please give us a thumbs up and like our video. We appreciate that a lot. Thank you so much. And if you have a question for Dr. Chan, okay, please remember to drop a comment, okay, and we will get back to you when we see your question. So Joe actually said hi. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Hello. Yeah. So Joe is actually from Icon Plus. I'm not sure whether Khai Leok, you're connected with Joe. Do you know him? But
Yes,
Joe
I
actually, Joe previously attended our session as well. He was sharing under the capacity of Icon Plus, right? So I'll quickly move on. Okay, so today Khai Leok actually has 4 tips or 4 perspectives of selecting a foreign U, right? So Khai Leok, what's the first perspective or first tip that you have, okay, for students who are looking abroad?
Well, I think the first tip is actually to understand yourself, your strength, and your long-term kind of desire in alignment with your strength. More specifically, I think you need to establish what subject area you want to pursue, and in relation to that, how that subject or how the degree that you're thinking of pursuing will help you towards that career aspiration of yours. I think you would see very quickly that there are very big decisions already at this point that you need to make. You're talking about your career, long-term plans. You're talking about the subject will decide on your career. But really, I think this is a good time for students, to reflect on what they have done, over the past 16, 17 years, both in terms of, what they're good at and what they want to do in the future, to harness that strength of theirs. So very often we start our conversations with students in that direction. I know that many A-level and IB students might struggle to address that question because, when you're in school, you learn the core academic subjects, econs, for example. There may be some, examples of applications of all these theories that you learn, but how that translates to, real working world, what kind of job opportunities are there out there, and in relation to that, what sort of degree programs there are, available. It's not entirely obvious to many students. We don't expect students to come in knowing what they want to do, but we would be happy to go into a conversation, that kind of helps with steering that direction. So first tip for you, decide on, or not so much decide, but think about, the kind of career that you want to pursue, and therefore, the subject area that you want to move into. Even talking about subject area, it may not be that straightforward. So for example, if you're an econs student, you have a choice of pursuing econs if you think you're strong in econs, but you may also want to do a more general program
Right.
like there's a business, for example.
Right.
Or if you want to be a little bit more specific, you can go into financial, a degree in financial analytics, data science, or things like that, which are kind of
Right.
related. Um, but just give me a second. Let me get this screen back up because I think
Yeah.
it's down.
Apologies for that. I was sharing with Dr. Chan earlier on that so far the doctors that I have interviewed, they all have a similar theme: technical issues. So the first one was dropping out because of Wi-Fi. The second one was low bat, and the third one is camera. Right. So it's kind of coincidental. Let's see for the next doctor that I'm going to invite. Let's see how it goes. All right,
Okay,
great to
fingers
have you
crossed
back, Khai
that,
Leok. Great.
sorry about that. Sorry about that.
No
Yeah,
worries,
so
no
I was
worries.
Yeah, I was sharing that even within the space of business or econs or finance, that there is actually a lot of nuances among the different degree programs. So that's something that we'll be happy to discuss with students. But it's also something that you should think about. Now, the reason why you need to think about that is, for example, if you were to apply to the UK, um, you will probably be aware that you need to write a personal statement, right? And the personal statement talks about how your interest in that area came about, what are the activities that you did, to evidence that interest. And usually the concluding paragraph would be along the lines of how you think that degree program will help you towards achieving, any vague or definite career goals that you have. So even the university, agrees that the first thing that you must look at is um, your subject and your in line with your career. Uh, Now, there are other reasons why you need to look into your subject preference. For example, different universities have different subject strengths, so not all universities, um, if the rankings are high, will necessarily be good in that specific subject.
Right,
Right?
right,
I can talk about that a little bit later, but very often, the choice of university actually depends on the subject of
right.
choice. Yeah. Also,
So,
along the
yeah,
academic, yeah, sorry,
right.
go on.
Go ahead. Sorry for cutting you. I wanted to
Yeah.
ask a question, but I let you finish first.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a few other things. So we also know that in terms of the style of teaching, it can be different in different countries. Obviously, we
Right,
know in Singapore it's a bit of a pressure cooker, as we are typically known uh, in terms of how
right,
our teachers teach. But you may like to know that different countries operate slightly differently. The US, for example, if you start on the degree program in the US, the first 2 years of your degree studies, you cover what they call general education. So essentially,
right,
you study a wide spectrum of subjects, ranging from the arts to sciences to communication skills, to presentation skills. It's almost like doing O levels again.
right.
Um, and then it's only in the final bit of the second year or even at the beginning of the third year that you actually start to specialize.
Hmm.
It's good for students who are still a little bit perhaps hesitant, to commit early into a specific subject area. So they have 1 or 2 years where they have this playground of, different subjects to feel and touch, and then they can decide later.
Right,
The other extreme is the UK. The UK system is very clear cut. Um, so I'm distracted because this screen has gone off. So UK is very clear. So if you start off applying to a degree in, say, Bachelor's of Economics, um, in your very first module that you take in your degree program is going to be economics, right till the very last module. I mean,
right,
they might pepper a few, electives here and there, but by and large, 95% of the program will be related to that degree that you have gone for. Yeah. So if you are very clear, you want to pursue mechanical engineering, you do not want to waste time, having to write history essays. perhaps the UK is a better option.
Right.
So some people might ask, so is there a compromise? Actually, Australia is a good compromise. Australia
Is that?
universities have, depending on the university and subject, but by and large, we're looking at maybe the first year covering 50-60% of the core subject that you are interested in, and maybe the rest, are electives where you can choose from, among the other subjects in other departments. But I say that with some caution because there are some programs, especially the accredited ones, like law or medicine, where you have less of a choice because they're quite compact.
Specialized.
The courses are compact already, so there's not much room, for the universities to maneuver or allow you to do something else. So that's education system for you to consider. What style of teaching, suits you. If you want a slightly more laid back kind of teaching, then you also want to consider New Zealand. They have a rather different style of teaching as well. Yeah, they allow students a bit more room to do self-exploration. There is more opportunities for hands-on, for internship, a little bit kind of vocational in that kind of feel and touch. Not overly so, but if you are more inclined towards something that's a bit more hands-on, a bit more relaxing, then New Zealand might be an option. So you can see already, different countries, teach out in different ways. So that's another.
I see.
Still along academic is ranking. I know ranking is top of mind in many students, especially if you are like kind of doing very well. You want to go for the World Top 5, World Top 10, Ivy Leagues, Oxford, and so on. If you are scoring the A's, your IBs are 43, 44, 45, then yes, I mean, I think it's entirely reasonable, for you to go for the best, challenge yourself intellectually, be among, the most academically inclined students, around you. But obviously, not everybody falls in that category. We have some students who might not be doing as well, or might accidentally falter during the exams. But you may be glad to know that there are actually a lot of universities that may not be obviously strong, as in they are not top of the mind because their rankings are not like in the top 5, top 10, but they are actually quite strong in specific subjects. One good example of a subject area that I would like to refer to is the allied health programs. Allied health refers to like physiotherapy, occupational therapy, dietary, speech therapy, that whole lot of dietetics. It's getting increasingly popular, I think, because our Prime Minister came up during one of the National Day speech saying that we double our numbers over the next, 5-10 years or something like that.
Right.
We saw a spike in the demand. But if you are looking at, the Ivy Leagues or the Oxford and Cambridge, Imperial, you won't find them offering any of the allied health programs because they're simply not strong in those areas. Right. Instead, you'll be better off going down the subject rankings table and then looking at those universities that are strong in those areas. For example, podiatry. Podiatry is an interesting subject. You may or may not have heard of it. It's actually looking at the lower limb, the legs. It's getting increasingly important because that diabetes cases are rising in Singapore. We've got issues with gangrenes, there's amputation of legs and so on. We need to double our podiatrist numbers over the next few years. One of the strongest universities offering podiatry is University of Southampton in the UK. I think not many people have heard of Southampton, or if they have, then it's not often regarded as a good university or among the best. But they are actually probably the best, arguably the best in the UK.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's important to look at the subject because those will relate to how you look at rankings, how you determine the universities in Europe.
Right. Subject also matters, as compared to the country itself, like what you've mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, country will be more of the academic education system, the way of teaching, and
Right.
subject determines a lot of other things, your choice of
Right.
uni, and yeah, and your budget and so on, which I'll talk about later.
Right. So, Dr. Chan, we have a question. It's by Mr. Ollie. Mr. Ollie is the father of Rajwa. And
Hi, Ollie.
Mr. Ollie has a younger, I think, has a younger daughter. So I believe the question is specifically tailored towards his daughter. So, what options will be available for a student in J1 with no O level cert to pursue uni in UK or EU? So I'm going to presume that the student is undergoing the IP track, okay, where they skip O levels and they're going straight to A levels.
It's a very good question. I mean, we actually have a lot of students who have gone through the IP routes. I think we have more than a dozen schools offering IP right now, and if you include the private schools, there's even more. Um, so not having done O levels is indeed somewhat of a concern, uh, particularly in the US. I know you haven't mentioned US, but I just wanted to point out that US universities they actually would need O levels for a student to exit from JC1 and enter university. So if you don't have O levels, it's an issue. But fortunately, in the UK and Australia, they have started to recognize our IP program. So a lot of universities are actually okay to recognize O level as the final qualification for someone who hasn't actually proceeded to do an A levels. So, for example, if in your case, if your daughter wants to exit after JC1, there are many universities, I wouldn't say all, but most universities and foundation schools, I'll touch on foundation schools later, but they will recognize secondary 4 qualification from whichever ISP school that your daughter comes from.
Well, the
So
Sec
in
4
other words,
equivalent.
yeah, the
Sec
Sec
4
4
equivalent.
so they
Right.
will look at the Sec 4 transcript from whichever secondary school that your daughter would come from, and then assess her on that basis. Obviously, with a Sec 4 or J1 qualification, your daughter wouldn't qualify directly for university. But you'll be glad to know that there are many um, colleges out there in the UK right now, and even in the EU, where they will receive either O level graduates or J1 uh, promo graduates into these 8 to 9 months foundation programs. And then if they do well for the program, in the program, they will actually be eligible to enter university directly. So it's kind of an alternative to A levels, much shorter, with arguably a higher chance of getting to some of the very good schools in the UK. Similar system exists in Australia. I know we haven't asked Australia, but it's quite similar in Australia as well.
Right.
I
So,
hope that answers the question in broad stroke.
right.
Um, uh, but I mean, in detail, we're talking about maybe 30, 40 of these colleges existing in the UK, and students from these foundation colleges can progress to some of the top 10, 15 schools in the UK, with perhaps the
Right.
exception of Oxford and Cambridge and Imperial, but the rest are generally fine.
Right. So, Mr. Ollie, I hope you have got your answer. Okay. If not, you can always follow up with the next question. Okay, and we will be moving on to the next tip. So, to the viewers out there, okay, thank you for joining us for this evening. If you like what you are hearing from Dr. Chan right now, hey, please do support us by giving us a thumbs up, okay, and like our video. If not, you can share this collective wisdom to a family friend who is looking to pursue education abroad. So, Dr. Chan, what do we have for the next tip or perspective that you have to pursue education abroad?
Yeah, the next one concerns especially parents, and that is to do with budget and finance. Admittedly, studying overseas is not going to be cheap. For one, you're paying international tuition fees. Okay, I mean, if you're studying in Singapore and then US, it's cheap because it's subsidized for Singapore citizens. But foreigners who come to Singapore to study in NUS or NTU or SMU, they actually pay a lot, to study here. So likewise, if you're studying overseas, you actually pay unsubsidized rates. You pay international fees. Usually we would say that the ballpark budget that you should set aside for overseas studies is roughly about 50,000 Singapore dollars per year. Okay, this will cover both tuition fees and living expenses, meaning accommodation, food, transport, maybe a bit of entertainment and so on. So 50,000, and if you then multiply it by 3 for a 3-year program, degree program, then it's $150,000. It's not cheap. You can buy a car
Right.
with it. If you're looking at medicine, for example, that medicine will be easily double or triple that cost. Both because the tuition fees on the monthly yearly basis is double or more, but also it's a 5-year program, so you multiply that by 5 years.
Wow.
So it's a significant investment. It's not for it's not a trivial decision that you want to make.
Right.
So I think if you are a student and you're watching this, then suddenly when you think about overseas studies, you should bring your parents into the discussion early.
Right.
Yeah, because it's not a trivial decision. Sorry, just a moment.
Right. So let's give Dr. Chan a moment to adjust his camera.
I think it's having some issues.
No worries. So meanwhile, yep. Thanks for being back,
Yeah,
Dr. Chan. Yeah. So
sorry about that.
just now we ended off with to involve the parents in decision making, right? So are there any cases where the parents and the student they are actually having differing opinions? Like for instance, one wants to go, the other don't want to go. And how do you normally resolve that?
Yeah, this happens all the time. I guess it's often the student who wants to go and the parents have limited budget. It's a huge commitment. Sometimes it could be the other way around as well. Students have their friends back in Singapore, but the parents perhaps they have studied overseas themselves. They want that international exposure
Right.
for their son. So it happens. It happens.
Right.
There are a few ways to look at it. If the parents are tight with their budget, then we have had cases where parents will offer to take up a loan from the bank, um, not a full loan because it's hard to get a full loan, but a substantial loan, and then put the child to task, to pay for the loan interest and the principal after they start work. So
Oh,
essentially they will pay back on their own. The parents obviously have to support a little because you can't take 150K loan or 200K loan because it's just too much for the bank
right.
to support. But if the parents are happy to fork out half of that amount from their savings, then the other half is usually okay to be supported through a bank loan. So that's one way to, I guess, build responsibility. Don't take the money for granted. Study hard, get a good job. I think
Right.
it makes sense. Yeah.
Perfect sense.
Uh,
Perfect sense.
yeah. There's interest incurred, of course. For parents who can afford, I would say, maybe you can pay for the cost upfront, but then have an agreement with the kid, to pay you back. That way, your interest wouldn't accrue.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
These
So
are ways around
the
it. Of course,
banker becomes the parent become the banker lah.
yes. In fact, the parents are both the guarantor and the banker and everything into one.
Right.
Obviously, as a child, if you as a student, if you haven't completed your studies, then I think it's your responsibility to do well for your exams. Hopefully, you'll be among the better students, and then you can potentially secure a scholarship or two, to alleviate the cost.
Right.
So that's the option. Then there's yet another option, and that is to consider a local overseas kind of hybrid. What I mean
Right.
is that you can start your tertiary studies in Singapore, cover a portion of it here, perhaps doing a, a sort of a diploma or a degree program, that allows you to transfer to an overseas school in your second or third year. We actually have quite a number of students, especially the male students, um, in their NS. They are very fortunately posted to a vocation that allows them to book out every evening, or there's a
Right.
lot of pockets of free time. So they actually sign up to a part-time degree program or diploma program in one of the private schools. They complete the degree of diploma, most likely a diploma, in the 2 years while they're in NS. And then with the diploma, they actually can get exemptions, 1 or 2 years of exemptions when they apply to an overseas degree.
Wow.
So essentially they cut out $50,000 because that's 1 year of cost, right? So you actually
Wow.
reduce that 50,000. In some cases, if the modules align very well, um, they may even get up to 2 years of exemption. It depends on your
Wow.
subject.
That's quite a lot.
Choice
100
of-
100K savings
It is.
almost there.
Yeah, it is substantial. So it's a very good way to make use of the NS time, and that is if you're fortunate enough to have that flexibility in your posting. And obviously, you need to be very determined because you're using whatever that's left of your time, to study and to take exams and so on. But we have had many students who've done that.
Right. So to the NS boys out there who is watching this, who will be watching this, okay, listen to what Dr. Chan has to say, okay? Especially if you are booking out every day, please make full use of your time and invest into a diploma so that you can get exemption for your further studies later on in your life. You can save a lot of money from there. Right.
Indeed. Yeah.
So,
So,
uh,
but realistically speaking, even with all these options, not everyone can afford the 50K per year or 100K for 2 years. Then in that case, we will have to perhaps advise that don't go into the discussion of suggesting your parents should mortgage the house or
oh
do
my
something
goodness.
interesting or use the retirement fund or things like that. Be
Oh.
sensible, study locally, maybe work part time or something. There will come a time, when you need to or you want to further your studies a
Or you
little
can
bit more.
finance it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, and then fund it, and then a degree studies is or postgraduate studies, masters is only 1 year in most countries. Um,
Right.
that is something that you might be able to support uh, in time to come.
That make, that makes sense. So everything has a time for itself, lah. Yeah. So the moral of the
Indeed.
story is to be patient and wait for your time, right? Yeah.
Indeed.
right.
Yeah, but
Ar-
having said that,
ar-
if you can afford, it's a good experience. It's totally worth it, I think, because your understanding of the world, is significantly expanded. And you realize that the world is a very big place. Singapore is, and our lifestyle, our culture is just one tiny representation of what the whole world encompasses. It helps with understanding colleagues when you start work. It helps with conversations when you go into discussions with partners, be it it could be foreign or local. Um, and I think it's just that maturity of thought. A lot of independence go into surviving on your own, and you learn from that process.
right. Very interesting perspective, maturity. So I'm just curious, Dr. Chan, are there any cases where you have uncovered that the household couldn't afford to finance the couldn't afford the financial aspect, and you managed to, talk the student out of this, knowing that it is not going to do the household any good if they insist to move on. Are there any cases like this, or you talk some maturity or some sense to the student?
I think very often when they start to talk to their parents, the situation becomes very clear. You know,
Right,
the parents think if they can't afford, then however the student insists, it's just not going to be possible.
right.
It's,
Constraint.
and then I guess the discussion then goes into what local options are there. We actually work with some schools locally as well. So these are alternatives that we will suggest.
Right, right.
I think part of growing up is also understanding your personal limitations or your family's limitations, uh, and then like you say, there's a time and place for everything.
Yeah.
So don't despair for those who can't afford at this point. Um, it- things might be different in a few years.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
or you can work with. We have many postgraduate students, in fact, and when you hear their stories, it's kind of this quite similar in that they would have worked for a few years, saved up, and they would use that money to further their studies. But more importantly, I think at that point they might then have better clarity as to whether they want to continue studying or moving in that direction. Say if you study business, whether you want to go into HR or um, or financial analysis or something like that, or you are sick and tired of business. Maybe I want to do law now because in my working world I've seen or interacted with a lot of lawyers. Maybe it's time for me to do a JD, and we have had students doing that as well. So it's never too late. Yeah, there are opportunities along the way. You're only
Right.
16, 17, 18, um, or maybe not 16, but 17, 18. The journey is still very long.
Right. Thank you for your advice, Dr. Chan. We will wrap up the financial perspective. I hope the parents and the students out there who are watching this expect you have greater clarity on how to manage mutual expectation. And for the students out there, if your parents have no means to finance that, you will always have a chance. Just need to be patient a little bit. Okay, wait for your time to come. So,
And while
Doctor,
waiting,
yep.
academics.
Right. So, Dr. Chan, we are going to move on to the third part. So, what is the third tip or perspective that you like students and parents to take when they are considering to study abroad?
Okay. The next thing is, so we've talked about the academic perspective, the financial perspective,
Right.
um, aspect rather. But the next thing that kind of concerns many students, and I think it's important, is the environment um, in which you study. Uh, so environment comes in many forms. The most obvious would be very physical form. So whether you prefer to be studying in a big city, in London, in Manchester, in Sydney, in New York, or whether you prefer a quieter place, maybe a more conducive, a more serene environment where you think you need that quietness, that peace, to focus and to study. Different people kind of thrive in different environments. We have many art students who prefer to be in vibrant cities because they will then have access to museums, they can watch plays and theatre works, and they get inspiration through those activities.
Right.
But we also have um, students who are more research inclined. They are more academically inclined. They want that room and space, to ruminate. They want to have a courtyard, outside of um, their accommodation. Uh, a quadrangle, where they can lay down under the sun and they can philosophize or think about
Wow.
solutions.
Wow.
So
My dream lifestyle.
the
This is my dream
indeed.
lifestyle. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So that would be a consideration for sure. Um, Now, then there are other things to consider. For example, some countries are more homogeneous in their um, student mix, in terms of where students come from. They're primarily, say, for example, British in a British school, uh, but some Australian universities have predominantly international students. So then it's personal, whether you want to um, be immersed in a new culture. You want to learn how different people live in different countries, or you maybe feel more comfortable being in a place where there's plenty of Singaporeans. You need the support around you. Um, so different universities have different um, mix, student mix. So this is something that you may need to consider as well.
Right. Cultural
Um,
aspect, you mean, right?
Cultural, demography. Okay, so I take one example. In the US, there is these colleges called community college.
Right.
Many students go to community college as a means, as a pathway to enter some of the better universities in the US. But by nature of construct, these community colleges are meant for all citizens in the US, whether they are age 16 or 60, whether they have done well or not well in their academics. These community college, because of the way they are constructed or they're intended, they take in all kinds of students and they're obliged to do so. Now, if you study in community college, clearly your view of America will be a lot more open up because you actually see all walks of life in your class. Okay. Whereas if you apply directly to an Ivy League school, you're likely to just meet the 17, 18, 19-year-old students, um, top of the class, cream of the crop,
Right.
and
Right.
they're just one more, essentially, compared with those in community college. We have had parents and students who feedback to us from both sides. We've got students from community college who say that it's a fantastic experience. Having been in the school environment for the past 16 years in Singapore, they feel they're overly protected. They're not ready for the real world. But that 2 years of immersion in the community college is actually more education than the textbooks or the exams that they take.
Right.
Uh,
Immersion experience counts.
yeah. So they come up more ready to be entrepreneurs, for example. They come up more ready to negotiate with a wider range of, partners, clients. Um, so these are the flip side of going to perhaps a different kind of study environment.
So, Dr. Chan, I have a question. So, for a 17, 18 years old, how would I know what kind of environment that I will thrive? So, for instance, is there a test that I can take? Or are there anywhere that I can find out which kind of environment suits me the most?
It's a very good question. Fortunately, we don't have to figure that out most of the time. Students, we find that they usually know themselves, what kind of
Right.
environment they strive. I think also partly because in school, many of them were done the MBTI test, um,
Hmm.
and that kind of gives a little bit of hint as to whether they are an introvert or extrovert.
Right.
Um, and that to a certain extent, give an indication of the kind of environment they like to work in. But also, I guess, the subject they would like to study, and how well the environment supports that subject
Right.
is the point of discussion as well. Yeah, as I mentioned, if you're doing an art specialist course, maybe it's worth looking at considering a school that is in a big city, or at least accessible to the big city.
Right.
But if you are a medical student, maybe you want to be next to a hospital, because the last 3 years of your studies will be clinical, and you'll probably be heading to the hospital, every day for your clinical attachment.
Right. Right. So, thanks, Dr. Chan, for providing the environment perspective to the parents and students tuning in. So, we will be moving on to the last tip. So, for the parents and students watching this, if you like what we are doing, okay, please remember to give us a thumbs up. Okay, if you have any last questions for Dr. Chan, remember to drop us a comment below, and we will get back to you in a short while. So, Dr. Chan, what is the last tip that you have for parents and students watching this talk show right now?
Yeah. Well, the last tip would be actually to look a little bit further than your immediate studies. What I mean is to think about what you want to do after your studies, because that actually, to a certain extent, answers the first question of what you should study or what you would like to study. Why do I say that? Well, obviously your career is important, so you need to ensure that you go for a relevant subject that points towards your career. Okay.
So let's give Dr.
moment.
Chan a second, okay, to adjust his camera. So meanwhile, we are coming to an end of the session. Okay, so this is the last tip that's going to be provided by Dr. Chan. So parents and students out there, okay, if you have any questions for Dr. Chan, he's here to provide free advice. Okay, so please make use of this opportunity. Reach out to him. Okay, drop us a question so we can help you. Right. So we are back at
Pardon me?
the post study.
Yes. Okay, so if you want to be a psychologist, for example, that's quite a classic example, because we see a lot of students very keen on pursuing psychology in the recent years. I think there's a misconception that psychology, if you do an undergraduate program, you graduate, you get a degree, you become a psychologist. But actually, that's not quite true. You become a generalist after you complete your undergraduate studies. Technically, you need to further your studies, to go into an area of specialization.
Right.
It could be a clinical psychology degree. It could be education psychology, occupational psychology, or something like that. The bottom line is you still need to complete your honors, masters, and sometimes even a doctorate degree. So understanding the requirements, to fulfill that career aspiration of yours is important. And then asking yourself whether you are prepared, to run, that runway to get to your endpoint. Now, the second is many students also look at overseas studies as an opportunity to work overseas, to gain overseas working experience.
Right.
We know there's a lot of MNCs in Singapore. A lot of hirers are actually foreigners, and they, in their daily dealings, as part of work requirements, they also require candidates or employees to be globally aware, to be globally connected. So having that bit of overseas work experience actually helps in convincing them that you are the right candidate. So many countries, they actually offer post-graduation work visa for students, meaning that after you graduate, they will extend your visa to allow you to work for a couple of years in the country. So then this gives you an opportunity to have a taste, of the working world out there. Unfortunately, not every country works the same. So if you have the intention to work in that country after you complete your studies, you have to be careful in your selection of the country. Yeah.
Right.
So that's one thing to consider.
Hey, Dr. Chan, I have a question. So, based on the criteria that you mentioned, so if I afford a postgraduate work visa, the next step in line is getting offered a citizenship or permanent residency. Am I right to say that, or do students take that into consideration that they want to live abroad? That's why they chose to
Yes, yes,
study.
yes. In fact, that was something that I wanted to get to, and that is
Right,
migration. So students actually think of studying as an opportunity for them to migrate eventually.
right,
Yeah. Different countries, of course, have different migration laws and requirements. Uh, and just give a second. I'm just
no
falling
worries.
off again. I apologize for this. Um, I'm not sure why, but the connection seems to be a little bit wonky.
Right.
Well, I'll
So,
just continue to speak, and if I connect, that's great.
yep,
Yeah,
yeah, you're
so
back, you're back, safe.
yeah, so we to a certain extent, if you have migration in mind, then you do need to look at uh, countries. So for example, in the UK, it used to be quite straightforward. You stay in the UK for 7 years, you can apply for citizenship. But today it's a bit different. You probably have to work a lot more. You have to secure a high earning job, and then you have to justify quite a bit. There's a point system and all that before you get your citizenship. But there are other places like, for example, Canada. Canada is now a very popular destination for people who want to use education, to migrate. Because after you study 2 years, you can actually get a post-graduation work visa, work for 2 years, immediately you get your permanent residency.
Right,
Okay, with permanent
right.
residency, you then apply for your degree. You pay domestic fees for your degree program, and then after
Oh,
working a few years, you can potentially migrate and become a citizen. So
wow.
yeah, so there are considerations there. Obviously, we are not into we're not a migration agent, so we can advise that the limit. There's a limit to how much we can advise on this, but you should certainly think about this if that's your goal. If migration
long
is not.
long term goal to migrate. Right.
That's right. That's right. You will also need to consider about accreditation because not every university is, particularly not every program is accredited by Singapore, and also not necessarily accredited by that host country that you're studying in. If you want to work there, so these are some additional considerations when you look at universities.
Right, right. So, thank you, Dr. Chan, okay, for sharing such insightful perspective, okay, specifically the academic, finance, environment, and post-study perspective. So, to the fellow parents and students out there watching this, okay, I hope you have greater insights what to look out for. Okay, specifically if you're looking to migrate. Okay, although Dr. Chan doesn't brand himself as a migration agency, but he still hides some aces under his sleeve. So please ask him out, check him out, okay, and plan ahead. All right. So due to time constraint, okay, we are going to wrap up. So Dr. Chan, before your camera blacks out again.
Oh, yeah, yes, I think I apologize.
No worries, no
Hopefully,
worries.
this
Yeah.
will happen.
Right. Okay. Okay. I would like you to adjust your camera. And yes, okay. What is your message, okay, to our current A level students or community or parents who are watching this live talk show right now? What is one singular message that you want to share to them?
Let's see. Well, you have if you're still taking your exams, you have the exams in front of you. First of all, do well in them because once you do well, you have a lot more options at hand. You're not limited, with your options. Now, second is if you have the time, you can start to look ahead as to what you want to do for your degree and also your career. These are not trivial matters. I mean, these kind of affects your next 40, 50 years journey. So do take a little bit of time off and think about what you want to do. Discuss with your peers. More importantly, your seniors, your parents, your relatives, your teachers. Um, Maybe someone who has been working, for some time. I think their perspective is important. If you already have an inkling of what you want to do, then perhaps it's useful, to look into that particular industry that you may be heading into, and ask someone who is already in the industry. How is it like? What's the future? What are the areas or jobs within that community? That is growing. That has the potential. Um, Now, the other thing is, if you don't do well for exams, also don't despair, because these days the education system across the world has become very mature. There are now a lot of opportunities for students to have a second chance. Um, so, if you haven't done well in your J1 or J2, particularly in econs, look for Jeffrey. But
Thank you.
there are many pathway programs around that will still lead you to some of the top 100 universities in the world. If you think you fall into that situation, or you want to discuss about that early as backup plans, feel free to reach out to us as well. And finally, all the best, to your academic years ahead. Hopefully, you'll enjoy your studying journey, and then doing well will also mean that you'll enjoy your career.
All right. Thank you for your encouraging message to the parents and current A-level students who are watching this. So, Dr. Chan, okay, who will you be looking out for, okay, to serve the current community that is watching this, the A-level parents and students? Are there any specific categorization of students or parents you are looking out for?
Yeah, we actually have a whole range of students of different backgrounds, needs. Um, we work with students who need a bit of advice, to support their thinking. We are sometimes, the conversation partner for many students. Um, we are also a point of contact if you think that perhaps you haven't done as well for your studies, but you want to have a second chance. I think that is actually our strength, because we know the education scene, across the world, and in fact there are many opportunities which are not that obvious to students like yourself, um, but I think these are opportunities that you should really consider if you think you fall through the cracks, and you need someone to kind of give you that second chance, the ladder to climb back up to the top.
Right.
And really, if you need support with all the pre-departure preparations, you've already decided that you want to go overseas, you just need that support for student visa application or accommodation, or you want to link up with fellow students who are heading to that university. Feel free to reach out to us as well. We have literally thousands of students, and we can certainly help you in some ways.
Right. So for the viewers out there, I have actually attached Dr. Chan's website, theRightU, okay, under the comment section. So do reach out to them, okay, and find out what they can provide specifically for the advisors, okay, and the arrangement, the boarding, one full suite service that they provide for overseas university. All right. So thank you. We have come to the end of the session. So to our parents out there and students out there, if you like our community series, please like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive upcoming interviews. Thank you, and I will see you guys again. Goodbye.
Bye bye.